Hi, everyone. I'm Colleen Stanley, and welcome to the Sales Leadership Awakening podcast. And obviously, joining me today is my co host, Stephen Rosen. We've got a good topic today.
This is a really important one. And sometimes, as we'll talk about, we forget. This is really goes to the heart of really empowering our employees to do well, but also to feel well.
Yeah. So, the topic today is we're going to be talking about a leader's role in helping their sales teams not burn out, drop out, and manage stress. And in fact, Stephen, I really appreciated the data points you sent me. I guess there was a 2020 spring health study, and that
Yes.
was right at COVID, where they were showing like 76% of employees were burned out. And I'm still seeing a lot of studies that are saying people are still stressed out. So, knowing that we play in the sales world, what are some things that sales managers can do to help their salespeople not burn out, drop out, and manage stress?
It's always interesting because I think there's a much more of a realization now that burnout and stress are prevalent in our society or more prevalent in our society.
Yes,
But
I
when
agree.
performance is off, and I'm probably just as guilty as most sales leaders, the first thing I don't think is burnout. If I'm coaching someone and they're having challenges with the rep, the first thing is, okay, are they making their calls? Do they have the skill? Do they have the will? Are they getting out there and doing what they need to do? But the challenge is that we forget that we also need to understand what's going on with our people. And I know when I coach leaders who are highly stressed, I'll ask them a variety of questions. Are you sleeping well?
Yes.
Are you coping well? Because I know those are signs. If we're not getting our night's rest, there's something going on. Are the employees absent more frequently? So they really need to understand, as part of being a leader and having that relationship with your salesperson, where's the person at? So if there is performance or productivity issues, we need to tease out what's really going.
Yeah. Well, and isn't that interesting? Because I know that would be my natural default. Okay, let's look at your activity plan. Are you targeting the right ideal client profile? Okay, let me hear you about your proposition. And I'm not saying that those things aren't important. We'll probably address that later. But it is important that you simply might have somebody that is in more of that burnout stage. And I think you shared something with me in one of our prior conversations that when you're burning out, was it called executive dysfunction? You can't even access the smart part of your brain.
That's really well put. I was fortunate enough, I was in the pharmaceutical industry and we sold central nervous system drugs and for depression. And there was one factor which was called executive dysfunction. Because your brain is impacted, you find you're having lots more challenges, planning, organizing, strategizing, paying attention to details,
Yes.
and managing your time. It's important for managers to recognize that stress is the biggest killer that we face in general, but that stress triggers some of these things where the employee is just not on the ball.
Maybe they're not being as we'd like to. This probably sounds awful. We think they're being lazy. They're not being lazy. They literally can't access that smart part of your brain because I know when I don't get a good night's sleep, I move at half speed the next day, frankly. So interesting that you in your former industry actually had a name for it.
Well, sometimes certain drugs help activate that, and sometimes people go off and need to be recharged. But of course, the leadership role is to make sure we don't lose our people to stress. And I would have to assume that most managers who've managed through COVID, if you remember, we were very much focused on how people were feeling as
Yes.
opposed to making calls or being productive initially. That
Right.
changed and went back to what we normally do and even helping employees. We do all types of training in sales, right?
What can they do from that skill piece? Number one, I think you said recognize that this may not be an activity issue, but then let's go to the other side. What are some things they can do to create an environment that decreases that burnout and stress? Are there one, two, or three things that you've seen when working with sales leaders?
100%. I mean, quite simply, it could be stress management courses, or workshops, which everyone in the organization can benefit from. One of the biggest issues that people experience burnout is when all of a sudden they feel they're overloaded with work. There's just too much going on. And some of that
Mhm.
comes back to effectively managing your time. Some strategies, because there are lots of things in every single job that we do, of breaking it down into buckets. Very simple approach. We have revenue generating activities, which at the end of the day, you want to do more of those. We have job related activities, which sometimes are things you have to do. And then we have this pile of stuff. And when you start to look at it, there's lots of what I call time sucking activities. And you want to eliminate those because you want to have your time and energy on what's going to make a difference.
So for the manager, it may not be teaching one more selling skill. It sounds like it's teaching priority management, productivity skills, because if they can get their days back in control, and I guess it's called working smarter, not harder, that actually is going to decrease their burnout and stress.
Well, 100%. And also, there's simple things we can do as leaders. When you're working hard, it doesn't cost you anything to provide recognition to your salespeople,
Yes, yes.
right? Because then we feel good about what we do as opposed to we're doing, and then we feel bad. We feel more stressed. Stuff like setting clear expectations. How many calls should they do? What are the expectations? If I work on a weekend, can I take some time off during the week? I'm at a conference for 3 days. One of the biggest things that I think it's incumbent upon leadership, not just from a burnout perspective, but one of the biggest levers that we pull is setting quotas. And if we
Okay.
have unrealistic quotas and people don't feel that they're achieving, I know my high achievers, they be pulling their hair. I'm doing everything I can do, Stephen, but I'm not hitting quota. And it does lead to a cycle of negativity, feeling that you're not doing enough.
You know what? And it's interesting. The quota is either not set correctly or they haven't taken the time to do that tedious work. At least I found it. You go through the numbers, how we're going to achieve the numbers, analyzing. And so as a result, maybe the quota is fair, but they don't know how to get there.
So what does a leader do in that case? They have to help show them the pathway.
Exactly.
What are
Exactly.
those critical success factors that are going to make a difference? And coming back to time management, focus on those key revenue generating activities. Colleen, I've talked a bit about the leadership role, and we know it's not just incumbent upon the leader, although the leader can make a tremendous amount of difference. How do you see salespeople taking responsibility, ownership for their own well-being and their own self-management to effectively deal with stress and the pressures of the job that they're in?
I'm glad we're talking about that because I've seen sometimes where, not everyone, but happens once in a while where a salesperson or any employee shows up to the company and says, "Make me happy." That is just not called life. I mean, can you imagine being married and every day, make me happy? So this is where I have this core belief and philosophy and experience that if we can understand that we do own part of the reason that we're burning out, stressing out. And so one of it is simply being aware, and this comes from all the experts. If you take a look at Angela Duckworth and Grit, you look at Dr. Paul Stoltz and the adversity quotient. A lot of the time, what you will hear is the consistent theme is the stress event, so to speak, that's causing burnout. The event isn't causing burnout or stress. It is your response to it. And Stephen, I'll give you a crazy example. Way back when I was a VP of sales, we had this lovely incentive trip to Austria, right? Leaving the United States. And of course, we've got a snowstorm occurring in parts of the country. So we get to our hotel in Austria. And it was really interesting watching the stress response. Some reps were stressed out. Their luggage hadn't made it, it was lost, and rightfully so. They're getting anxious. However, I had another set of sales reps where the response was entirely different. And in fact, I remember one rep coming up to me and saying, lost luggage, underwear, highly overrated. I'm hitting the bar. Now, it was it was the same event,
Yes.
different responses.
You know what? That's a great story. If I can share one with you, we had a sales meeting when 9/11 hit. Someone came running in and said, I can't believe what happened. They were crying. They were upset. We decided to cancel the rest of the sales meeting and send people home because at that point we thought the world was ending, right? We didn't know
Sure.
what was
Yeah, that
going
was a
on.
scary time.
And some of us stayed on. I didn't have to fly out as it was based relatively close to my house. And we decided for those who stay on, we are going to party like it's 1999, despite all the craziness going on. We had bottles of tequila and we decided we were going to have fun because we can't control the events around us, but we can at least try to have fun together. And that became
Mhm.
a memorable moment. So it's true. Some people were crying and upset, and it was upsetting. But some people said, you know what? We can't control it. We're going to have fun. Maybe that's a good way to deal with stress.
Choosing your response, and that is a really extreme example, right? Because that was a scary, tragic time. Some people may not agree with what you guys decided to do, but guess what? It's what got you through that event, right? With this ownership, this takes the EQ skill of self awareness and self regard, the ability to admit your strengths and weaknesses. And so part of owning, hey, maybe I'm causing myself to go into burnout or stress is that being aware of what you should say no to instead of saying yes. And so this is where you talked about it. Are we aware of what our high revenue activities are? And I actually brought it up here for our conversation today. I'm reading this book, 10X is Easier Than 2X, and it's by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And they talk about a principle we've all known for a long time. 20% of your effort will probably yield 80% of your results, right? But let's talk about why we don't do it. Because we're all so caught up in the busy, not productive bucket. So we don't slow down to maybe analyze our win loss analysis. That's fully in your control. So when you slow down to analyze, where am I winning? Where am I losing? Maybe you have to slow down and actually ask somebody else for advice on blind spots. So sometimes we are not doing, and I'll refer to another book called Deep Work from Cal Newport. We're not doing the deep work that produces big results because, again, deep work means you've got to carve out 2 to 3 hours in your day. And whether you're a sales leader or a salesperson. And so we sit there and we go, well, I can't do that. I've got to answer emails. I've got to do this. Well, that's all what we call, or Cal Newport would call transactional work. That is not big value work. So if we start making a decision, I'm only going to do value work, we're going to be less stressed because we're going to start getting better results in less time.
I mean, that is beautiful advice for everybody in terms of slowing down to speed up,
Yeah, absolutely.
and
Right.
having some thinking time to actually look at what is important and what we're doing. And sometimes you're right, we're running so fast, we can't even tie our own shoelaces.
We're running a bunch of meetings, but are they quality meetings versus quantity meetings? And so that could be on the sales leader. What are you measuring? Are you measuring the quantity of meetings or the quality of the meetings? I've seen managers that are expecting their team out 5 days a week. I don't know where you're gonna have time to plan, but I would rather see reps plan really good sales conversations, either with existing clients or brand new prospects, than just run, 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 run. One of the themes I'm seeing, hearing as I'm out there is quality is going to beat quantity. But when you're doing quality, that also decreases stress because you're getting better results.
It sounds like a lot of it has to do with mindset. If you're feeling good about what you're doing, when you feel in control, you're going to prevent those high levels of stress as opposed to feeling like a spinning top.
That's just one more point there. That's a common theme with all of the study in resiliency. Focus on what you can control. For example, one of the reasons I think reps get stressed out, how many reps do you know, and even sales leaders, let's put them in this category,
Yes.
that spend enough time practicing? Now, if you practice, that is the only way to achieve mastery. And when you achieve mastery, sales gets a lot easier. And it gets a lot easier to manage a masterful team. We're the only profession that sits there and goes, well, practice isn't real. It makes me uncomfortable. You know what? Well, then get uncomfortable being burned out all the time. This is another, have some self awareness. Part of the reason you're burned out is you're not as good as you could be.
I thought you were on the employee side here. What you're saying is ownership, demonstrate, and make them, if they're not self aware, then they're running and doing things that don't make sense.
You're out practicing on your prospects, so that's not a good way to get a quality outcome.
I love it. So you've talked to me a number of times and an important factor that sometimes we don't catch on to, but the importance of community for many reasons, feeling of belonging. But talk to me about the feeling of community and the importance of community in terms of dealing with stress.
Well, again, Stephen, I do a lot of reading. I just am lucky I like to, but that's a theme I'm starting to see more and more of as it relates to building more resilient people and teams. So it maybe start rolling back a lot of years. I grew up on an Iowa farm, 500 acres. So there's 2 seasons in farming, and I am going someplace with this. So it's similar to sales. So you plant the seed, prospecting, and then there's harvest, which is getting the crops out. And that's
Right.
the equivalent of hitting a sales goal. Well, a lot of times what would happen, Mother Nature sends rain, storm, hail. And so you are putting in tremendously long hours. And so one thing I never heard my parents say was this: oops, bad year. We're not going to get the crops out. Their thinking and how they trained all of us without knowing it is, you got to get the crops out. Now, here's where community comes in. after putting in long hours, this is 2 or 3 months of 18-hour days, they would go over and pick up the phone, call a neighbor who was still working in the field, trying to get
Right.
his crops out. And the conversation would be, and Lanny Miller was one of our neighbors, and he said, Lanny, we're coming over. We see you're in the field. We're going to help you get your crops out. That's community. Because think about it. They're sitting there helping somebody else achieve the sales goal, getting the crops out. How much better would we be if business sales cultures adopted helping others get their crops in, right?
Yeah. Community, tribalism, I think was one of the terms, or elders. It's a great example.
So in companies, one of the expectations I would hope managers set is that if you are one of the elders, seasoned people, you will be a mentor and be very happy about it, right? Because no one gets to where they are alone. And so if you can have mentors, what that also has been shown to do, and this is from some of the research from Dr. Seligman and Dr. Kellerman, when you have greater workplace social support, that is going to come from mentoring, somebody paying attention, making sure you're not going it alone, you'd have a 40% higher workplace meaning. Then you connect that with another set of data they have. When I have a higher sense of my work matters, resiliency goes up 23%.
And these are nuances that have tremendous impact on performance, on well-being, on feeling good about what you do, about having a good life.
Exactly. And I remember when I was promoted to VP of sales, I'm presented with this big budget. I have no idea how to look at the budgets. I am drowning. So it wasn't the mentorship came from me from our CFO, who would sit with me hour after hour explaining the numbers. What do you want to look for when you see this number off of the balancing? And you know what? And he was busy. I wasn't a direct report to him, but he was taking the time to
Yes.
mentor me. And so mentors matter because when you don't have to go it alone, I contend your resiliency is going to go up. And that's that workplace social support.
So sometimes, it goes the other way, right? Where you have a mentor or a friend and we complain to them, or we come the commiseration friendship.
Oh, okay.
Talk to me about the commiseration cause it could go the other way if everyone is complaining about something and creates greater stress.
You know what? I am so glad you brought up that point. So it's called you host a pity party, but the problem is the people RSVPing, they are all whining, complaining about what they can't control. And you literally catch their emotions. The term is emotional contagion. So it's what the late Jim Rohn, he has a very famous quote. You are the average of the 5 people you hang with. And so when you start taking a look at why you're stressed and burned out, I start taking a look at who you're hanging around with. What's the old saying? Fly with the eagles, not the pigeons. I don't know. I don't have the birds down right.
Birds of a feather flock together.
Yeah. People that like to commiserate, gossip, but they're not start listening. Are you talking about solutions or problems? And that can be a big way that you continue to accelerate actually your burnout and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yes. Okay. So it's not just picking friends or having a mentor. It's picking the right ones that can lift you up.
Absolutely. I purposely at this point in my life and career, just because you learn more, and I have been a toxic person, the one complaining and this, and that's why I'm so passionate about helping people see it differently. It does not serve you well. So I really am at a point where I get rid of toxic people. I know mentally I don't want to manage it, and I know the outcome isn't going to be good because it's very easy to get into the blaming, excuses, and victimhood, which all, by the way, research shows victim mentality leads to higher stress and burnout.
100%. I think those are great points. Community is important. Of course, it gets nuanced that you want to have people who can
Yeah.
help you, lead you along, make you feel like you're not alone, help you get solutions. For me, if I were to look at what we talked about, which is really, really important, especially if one of your salespeople or yourself as a sales leader is experiencing burnout, one of the important things to remember is that it's a shared responsibility. I talked about leadership's role, and I really do believe leadership has a big role to play. If you eloquently stated that self-awareness, self-well-being, self-care is also incumbent upon the sales rep.
It's my job to get sleep. Now, if you've got a 1-year-old, we're going to give you a break. Okay.
100%. So it's shared. Part of the thing that really helps, and I know we didn't mention it, I just want to add it, communication. honest communication. This is what's going on in my life. Having the confidence to say, hey, you know what? I'm really having a challenge here. That makes it easy for your sales leader, right? Some people just don't connect the dots and figure it out. What I'm saying to them is try to figure it out, try to understand your people and realize there's always more to performance than just the initial thoughts. Colleen, what was your big takeaway you'd like our listeners to leave with?
Well, I love the idea that you said it's a shared responsibility because what I've seen in my years of teaching resiliency is that if you don't own it, you can't change it. And so that's probably where I lean a little bit more because I can't change another individual, but I can change myself. I'd say the other thing, and probably just an add on with community, Stephen, is as a sales leader, I encourage everyone to keep having your regional meetings, your national sales meetings, because Zoom is great and we get a lot of work done that way, but there's nothing that replaces the face to face. When you take a look at happiness in the workplace, Gallup has said this for years. If you have a best friend at work, well, think about where a lot of those best friends came from. You go to the meeting and then you're having lunch, you're having dinner, maybe after hours activities. And that's where a lot of those friendships occur. I remember a few years ago working with a fast growth company, and the CEO was having 2 meetings a year, and they were getting pretty large. And I asked the CEO, Kent, I said, Kent, you've got 2 meetings a year. These are pretty expensive. And he looked at me and he goes, well, Colleen, I'm an accountant by training, and I've done the math. By getting people together, meet, greet, have fun, if I prevent 2 people from turning over, I have paid for my meeting. That's community.
That's great math too.
Yeah, that is great math. And sometimes when we're not having the face-to-face meetings, we look at the P&L the wrong way. Airfare, hotel rooms, food, beverage, but we don't look at, okay, somebody had a hallway conversation, somebody had a mentor conversation, somebody, like to use your words, just left recharge. There isn't a line item for that revenue. We often miss the return on investment that face-to-face communication and meetings can have.
So all I can say is you saved the best for last because you're right on. And usually as a sales leader, you know this, you're usually fighting or trying to push the CFO, the general manager to remind them the importance of bringing people together and the power of that from a team perspective, from an emotional perspective, from a connection to the organization. So I think you saved the best insight for last. So let's not forget people that job of sales leadership is let's bring people together. Let's congregate. Thank you for listening as we wind up another great session, at least in my opinion, and I'm sure Colleen's of the Sales Leadership Awakening podcast. We hope that you've gathered at least 1, 2, or 3 valuable strategies that you can use to prevent 1 or 2 of your people from experiencing burnout and the negative impact. So let's prevent burnout and let's increase sales. Thank you for joining us.